Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video on the channel, guys. So what I have for you guys today is another episode of the Championship Roundup, guys. So if you've not seen this series before, basically what it is, this is the series where we basically review all the action that took place this weekend in the Championship. And this weekend in the Championship, guys, we have quite a lot to talk about, to be completely honest. We had a lot of matches taking place at the top and bottom of the table, and to be honest, this week we had quite a few shock results. So what I'd love to know from you guys is basically, what did you think of your team's performance? Make sure you do leave a comment in the comments down below. Also, as well as that, who do you think scored the goal of the weekend, and what do you think was the result of the weekend as well? I'll be revealing what I thought they were at the end of the video, and this video is actually going to be split into two parts. So the first half of the video will be me going over all this weekend's action in the Championship, and then the second half of the video will be my predictions for the midweek games going on in the Championship, guys. So make sure as well you guys do get your score predictions in for the midweek games coming up on Tuesday. I'll leave all the fixtures that are taking place in midweek in the description down below, so you guys can go ahead and make your predictions. Then if you do get any of your score predictions right, I'll include your comment at the start of the next video. And speaking of the next video, guys, I will include your comments on screen now, so if any of you did successfully manage to predict any of the scorelines taking place this weekend, I will include your comments on screen now. So honestly, fair play to everyone who did get a score prediction correct this week, because like I said, there were quite a few twists and turns going on this week, and it was quite an unpredictable week, if I say so myself. So enough of me rambling on, we'll just get into the games. So our first game, guys, was the one taking place on Friday night between Birmingham and Leeds United, and honestly, every game now for Leeds United is like absolute gold dust in terms of picking up all 3 points. It's getting to the real business end of the season now, and how tight it is in the playoffs is just absolutely ridiculous at this point in time. So to go ahead and go to St Andrews away and pick up all 3 points was massive for them, and I've got to be said, I think Birmingham would have been slightly disappointed really not to get anything out of this game. I didn't think they were actually too bad considering what we've seen of Birmingham at times this season. I thought that at times they were actually quite dominant in the game, but they just couldn't find that final quality to go ahead and really trouble Leeds much in front of goal. I know Rob Green pulled off quite a few impressive saves, but apart from that, Leeds just had that cutting edge that Birmingham didn't, and it's that man Chris Wood again who stepped up for them. And then for our next game, guys, we had a massive game taking place at the bottom of the Championship. We had Blackburn who came up against Wigan, and in the end Blackburn managed to take full advantage, take all 3 points thanks to a Marvin Emnes goal, leading to a 1-0 victory. And it was a very well taken goal as well. It was a nice touch from him, and he fired it into the bottom corner. And the things that Tony Mowbray's managed to do for this Blackburn side do seem to be working at this point in time. Ever since he's come in, they've looked stable at the back, and if he can get the best out of players going forward like Sam Gallagher and Marvin Emnes, honestly, you could really make a case for them staying in the league. However, the same can't really be said for the Wigan at this point in time. Defensively, they don't look too bad. They've actually been looking very good recently in defence, especially since Matt Gilks has come in between the sticks. They've not looked too bad at all. But going forward, Omar Bogle just looks so isolated, and it really is frustrating because I do think he has the potential to be a really good Championship striker from what I've seen of him, but he's just not getting the service. And then for our next game, guys, we had another massive game going on at the bottom of the Championship. We had Bristol City who came up against Burton Albion, and somehow this one managed to finish 0-0. How Bristol City didn't manage to capitalise and take all 3 points from this one, I will never know, to be completely honest. I mean, Burton Albion weren't completely outclassed of this game, but I'd say some of the chances which Bristol City had, they should have picked up all 3 points in this match, and because they haven't, they've actually now slipped into the bottom 3, which is, honestly, this could be a really troubling season for Bristol City now if they're not able to pick themselves up from it. I mean, I think Bailey Wright had a shot which was cleared off the line, but their biggest chance definitely fell to Lee Tomlin, whose penalty went sky flying over the bar. I couldn't believe he missed the penalty, and that could be crucial come the end of the season that he didn't actually score that. So Bristol City, are you going to stay up? I think a point definitely suited Burton more than it did Bristol City. And then for our next game, guys, we had Derby County who came up against Barnsley, and finally Derby have managed to go ahead and pick up a victory. Recently, Derby really haven't been in good form under Steve McLaren, and we've sort of seen their playoff push really fade away ever since the new year came, really. I mean, I know quite a few people were backing Derby to go ahead and finish in the playoffs after around November, December time. They were actually looking very promising. Players like Tom Ince were absolutely on fire at that time, but we've of course then since seen a bit of a collapse from Derby. But this performance was a nice little step in the right direction, in my opinion. I'd say that Barnsley weren't really at their best this season. I think they'll have been quite disappointed, really, considering some of the heights which Barnsley have actually hit this year. But in this one, Derby were the best team. I thought 3 points was deserved. It was also nice to see David Nugent go ahead and grab his first goal for Derby. I think this season, I don't think Derby will make the playoffs, so really I think this season should be about making the best of what they can set up for next year. And then into the next game, guys, we had my club Preston North End, who came away to Fulham, and in the end Fulham managed to take all advantages and finished 3-1 to Fulham. A really disappointing one really from a Preston North End perspective, but honestly looking back at this game I can't really have any complaints from it, because honestly in this one Fulham just were the better team. There's no two ways about that really. I thought that Preston at times just couldn't deal with some of their directness, some of their pace was absolutely fantastic, and that dynamic that they've got going forward with some of their wingers linking up with Chris Martin up front, it was just, we couldn't deal with it. And you know, players like Cabano and Aluko in this one were absolutely electric for Fulham, and in the end these are two sides, Fulham and Preston, who of course are still chasing the playoffs. I'd say that playoff dream for Preston is slowly slipping away now. Preston really did need to get something out of this game to go ahead and really put a playoff push forward, but I'd say the difference between these two sides was really our clinical edges really. Preston just still doesn't seem to have that about them, whereas Fulham were absolutely excellent. And honestly, do you guys think Fulham will make the playoffs now? Because I don't know, there's teams in the playoffs who have looked shaky at times this season, so if anyone's going to get into the playoffs now, it's going to be Fulham, and fair play to them. And then into our next game, guys, we had Ipswich Town, who came up against Brentford, and in the end this one managed to finish as a 1-1 draw. I'd say in terms of games this probably wasn't the game of the weekend in my opinion, you know, and Ipswich in this game were bolstered by the return of Tom Lawrence into the starting 11, and he actually did create the first goal for Ipswich, so he really showed how much of a pivotal cog he was in their side. But despite Tom Lawrence being back in the side, they couldn't take full advantage, and Brentford did come back into the game, and I've got to say Brentford in this one probably were actually the better side in this one, I've got to be completely honest. I mean, in 2017 of course Ipswich had been in fantastic form, but in this one I didn't think they were really at their best. I actually thought that Brentford, with some of the chances they had towards the end of the game, could have gone on to win it. They just didn't have that final edge in front of goal. And into our next game, guys, we had Nottingham Forest, who came up against Brighton, and oh my word, I've got to say, no one was expecting this. I couldn't believe this one when I did see it, but Forest managed to walk away with a 3-0 victory over Brighton. Honestly, this was just a mad result, and when I saw it, I just couldn't believe it. Both these sides went into half-time at 0-0, and when you see that, you know, Brighton they must have had sort of like the inkling really that Newcastle were playing Huddersfield later on, so this was a massive opportunity for Brighton to go ahead, pull away from Huddersfield a little bit and close the gap on Newcastle. And as it was 0-0 going into half-time, you'd expect Brighton to raise their performance going into the second half, because in the first half they certainly weren't at their best, but I couldn't believe what happened in the second half really. And Brighton fans, what did you think of this one? Let me know in the comments down below. Are you a little bit worried now that you could be missing out on promotion, or do you think, with of course Huddersfield losing this week, do you think that was a massive let off for you guys and that you will still make the top 3? Because your reaction to this result will be very interesting indeed. But I'm not going to take anything away from Nottingham Forest. I will say they did get a bit fortunate with their first goal. A couple of question marks were put over that, the goal with Clough scoring that one, and he does seem to be a very nice addition to this Forest side, I must say that as well. But finishing 3-0 in the end, I just couldn't believe it. And then into our next game, guys, we had QPR, who came up against Cardiff City, and in the end QPR managed to walk away with a 2-1 victory. So of course this one was Neil Warnock returning to QPR, so it was always going to be an interesting encounter to say the least, and QPR actually managed to take full advantage in this one. To my surprise really, I was going into this game, I was backing a Cardiff City victory. You know, considering how well Cardiff have been playing lately, I thought they'd go to QPR and really take the game to them. And honestly, from the first half, that is what was happening really, but Cardiff just didn't seem to have that clinical nature in front of goal. They created quite a few opportunities, especially in the first half, but just weren't able to take them. And in the second half, the game just flipped on its head really, and you know, Cardiff were made to pay for missing those opportunities, as QPR were able to sink them in the end. So I'd say that in terms of how the table is looking now, it's obviously going to be a mid-table finish for Cardiff, but I do think that QPR should be safe from relegation now for the rest of the season. I'd be very surprised if they did go down. I think their squad is just too good for that really. And then into our next game, guys, speaking of teams which could be going down, Wolves are definitely not out of the relegation picture, and this one in the end managed to finish 2-1 to Reading, and a really disappointing one from the perspective of a Wolves fan, I'm sure. And honestly, times just seem to be really worrying at this point in time for Wolves. 2017 hasn't been kind to them, and their form under Paul Lambert really hasn't been picking up lately. They went under, I think it was in around December or something like that, where they went on a semi-decent run with Paul Lambert, but ever since then, just nothing seems to be going their way. And it's got to be said as well, I didn't think that Reading were at their best in this game either, and I did think that this was a massive opportunity, considering how, I say, shoddy Reading were at times. They weren't awful, but they weren't great in my opinion. So I say that this was a massive opportunity for us to actually go ahead and maybe snatch a point from this game, but that just wasn't to be the case in the end. Reading, we got a massive 3 points for this one because, of course, you know, anything could happen in the Championship with how well Fulham are playing lately. You know, Reading could even miss out on the playoffs, considering their running that actually Reading have got recently, and with their next coming up games, they've got some massive games coming up. So to get 3 points in this one was massive for Reading. And then for our next one, guys, we had Rotherham United, who came up against Aston Villa, and in this one, Aston Villa managed to go ahead and claim all 3 points. It wasn't really the easiest one for Aston Villa, I think it's fair to say, from Rotherham's perspective, but Jonathan Kodjo, of course, managed to get back on the score sheet for this one, so that was nice to see him get back on the score sheet for this one after he's had some troubling times recently for Aston Villa. I've seen quite a few Aston Villa fans hurtle some stick towards Kodjo, and rightly so recently, but he was back on the score sheet for this one. But in the end, I'd say it was a deserved victory for Villa, really, and going up against Rotherham, that was to be expected. Into our next game, guys, we had Sheffield Wednesday, who came up against Norwich, and in the end, Sheffield Wednesday managed to win by 5 goals to 1 against Norwich. And I've been saying constantly throughout this season, I don't think that Sheffield Wednesday have been performing to their optimum, and looking at some of their striking options, they should be doing better. I'd say this is where Sheffield Wednesday just unleashed everything going forward, and this is how I feel like Sheffield Wednesday should have been playing for the entirety of the season, because you can see now by this performance what some of these players are capable of. However, I do feel like they were aided by some really shoddy defending by Norwich at times. I don't know what, it was just calamitous at times. I don't know what they were doing for half of them, and in this game, Norwich, really, to go ahead and get into the playoffs, it already would have been a bit of an upset for them to go and get into the playoffs, but Norwich needed to pick up all 3 points in this one, in my opinion, if they were to have any sort of outside hope of reaching the playoffs. But Sheffield Wednesday really did put down a stamp of authority onto the playoffs with 3 points against this Norwich side in this one. Norwich had a little bit of hope at one time for Cameron Jerome, but that was just completely stamped out in the second half, and Jordan Rhodes looked to be on really good form in this one. He looked to be excellent in this one, and Ross Wallace as well scored a great goal, but the goal of the day for Sheffield Wednesday had to go to Forestieri for that free kick. It was absolutely inch perfect from him, and all around it was fantastic from Wednesday. And then for our last game, guys, taking place on Saturday evening, we had Huddersfield Town, who came up against Newcastle United, and this was a massive game taking place at the top of the table, and in the end, Newcastle have taken full advantage with a 3-1 victory. And honestly, I'd say that this game did a massive favour, in my opinion, for Brighton of all other teams, because of course with Brighton losing in this one, this was a huge opportunity for Huddersfield, of course, going into this one already knowing that Brighton had lost that game, to go ahead and close the gap. But in the end, they just couldn't do that. Newcastle just had that bit more quality going forward, and of course Newcastle got off to the dream start, really, with that penalty going for them, and Richie managed to stick that away. And it was also a boost as well to have Dwight Gale come back into the squad later on, and he managed to, of course, grab the winner in this 3-1 victory. I don't think Huddersfield were at their best, although I don't really think Newcastle were at their sparkling best in this one either. We actually saw Huddersfield dominate the possession in this one. They just couldn't really convert that into creating as many chances or goals in this one, which was a bit of a disappointment for them, but they'll of course be looking to recover from that quickly. So there, guys, were all the matches that took place this weekend in the Championship. So in terms of my result of the weekend, I'm going to go ahead, there could be a couple. I was very close to giving it to Blackburn for going ahead and beating Wigan, because that could be a massive 3 points come the end of the season, but I'm going to go ahead and give it to Nottingham Forest, just because nothing was expected of them for this one. Coming up against Brighton, who are second in the table, it was a great result. So my result of the weekend is going to be Forest for beating Brighton 3-0. And then as for my goal of the weekend, guys, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Fernando Forestieri. I think I've already given it to him a couple of times throughout this season, but that free kick he scored, oh my god, it was just absolutely sublime, guys. If you've not checked his free kick out already, make sure you go watch it, because honestly, it was just a fantastic strike, and the Norwich keeper really stood no chance. So now, guys, into my midweek score prediction. So I'll just quickly rattle through all of these, guys. So Birmingham against Wigan, I'm going to go ahead and say we'll level as a 1-1. That's actually an interesting encounter, that one. Blackburn going up against Cardiff. I'd say that Blackburn have been very decent recently. However, I am expecting a bounce back from Cardiff, so I'm going to go ahead and say this one will finish 1-1 as well. Bristol City against Norwich. What a game this could be, but it's a difficult one, but I am fancying Norwich to have a reaction from that awful display they had last time out. So I'm going to say 2-1 to Norwich for that one. Derby against Preston, I'm going to say is it going to be a 0-0 draw. I think that could be a stalemate. Fulham against Leeds, what a massive game that could be for Fulham. It's a really tough one to call, so I'm going to go ahead and say 2-2 for that one. Huddersfield going up against Aston Villa, once again a very difficult one to call, but I'm going to go ahead and say Huddersfield will bounce back with a 2-1 victory. Ipswich going up against Wolves, I'm going to back a 2-0 home win to Ipswich. Forest going up against Brentford, a difficult one. I'd say that with how inconsistent Forest have been recently, that's actually a really difficult one to predict, and I was quite impressed with Brentford this weekend, so I'm going to go ahead and say that one will finish 1-1. QPR going up against Barnsley, I think this one will end level as a 1-1 draw. Rotherham against Brighton, if Rotherham are able to go ahead and beat Brighton, and Brighton really will be bottling it then, it would appear like, but I am going to fancy Brighton to bounce back in this one, so I'm going to say a 3-1 victory for Brighton. Sheffield Wednesday going up against Burton Albion, I do get the feeling that Sheffield Wednesday make it more difficult than they need to, especially against teams which are around the bottom of the table, so I'll say they'll come out with a slim 2-1 victory over Burton. And then we have a massive game taking place at the top of the table. We have Reading, who are coming up against Newcastle. I'm going to go ahead and back a 2-0 win to Newcastle. Let me know what your score predictions are in the comments down below. So guys, I will now wrap it up for this video of the Championship Roundup, guys. So if you have enjoyed, make sure you do leave a like. It is always massively appreciated. As well as that, if you are new around here, make sure you subscribe for regular Championship content. Make sure you leave a comment in the comments down below as to what you thought of everything on this video, guys. But like I said, thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed, leave a like. But other than that, guys, I'll see you all in the next one.